Hey, Bunkin fans, it's Strickland, the other half of the Nice Guys on Business. Doug recently interviewed Steve Shevlin, founder and CEO of Emerging Global Services, and Steve has written an amazing report called 3 Steps to Staffing and Retaining a Winning Team, and you can get it free through a link in our show notes. Here is Doug and Steve talking a little bit more about it.
Tell me a little bit about the origin of Emerging Global and where you guys think that you've been successful when it comes to hiring and retaining people.
It's all about finding great talent. Having a successful company is all about tapping into great people.
Steve, where do you think that most people fall down on the job when it comes to not only retaining good people, but finding good people to begin with?
It has a lot to do with their own passion for their own business. And does that come through in an interview? You're interviewing them, but they're also interviewing you. They want to know, is this person passionate? I'm the owner of a company, so I'm going to be naturally excited and passionate about what I do.
So the information is in 3 Steps to Staffing and Retaining a Winning Team. And I found as I was reading the 3 steps that whether you're brick and mortar, digital, entrepreneur, or corporate leader, it actually fits into any environment. Why do you think that that is so?
Because in all those environments, you're dealing with people. And they all need to be managed. They all need to be motivated, developed, invested in. All of these things are true to every great company. Great organizations have great people behind it.
Steve, I want to ask you about 2 numbers. 1,257, which is the episode number that you're on the Nice Guys on Business. And secondly, 3, as in 3 steps to staffing and retaining a winning team. Where did you come up with the 3? And how do you know that these are like the tried and true 3?
I've been doing this for 30 plus years. And so it's a lot of sweat equity. It's a lot of hard knocks. It's a lot of work. And it is some reading and some education along the way. There's no doubt. Trial and error as well.
So check out episode 1257 on the Nice Guys on Business, where Steve and I have a conversation on everything that it takes to get and retain a quality staff. And then download his document, 3 Steps to Staffing and Retaining a Winning Team. Thanks for being here, Steve.
Thank you so much.
They don't have any good ideas. They don't have any bad ideas. So they do a podcast. Now, here's the Nice Guys on Business. Go from where you are now to where you could be. Get expert tips to grow your business, to be more productive and more efficient, whether you're trying to build influence, grow your community, or make it rain. Best-selling author of Nice Guys Finish First, Doug Sandler, can lead the way. The Nice Guys on Business is produced by Turnkey Podcast Productions. Now, here's your host, Doug Sandler.
Looking to go from invisible to influential with a distinguishable, uncopyable brand, message and podcast, nurturing listeners into leads from their very first episode. Now, that's a huge promise statement, and that's directly from the little application that today's guest, Annemarie Cross, had put together for us. I think she's up for the task. Her show is called The Ambitious Entrepreneur Show, and the host is here, Annemarie Cross. She's here to talk. Welcome, Annemarie, to the podcast.
Thank you, Doug. It's an honor and pleasure to be here with you today.
I love having you here, and I love having experienced podcasters on, because I was listening to your latest episode, and the content was great, but the number of episodes that you have is so impressive. 300 plus episodes. Something in this game has worked well for you. What has it been?
Where do I start? I think when I started podcasting back in 2008, we had no idea just how powerful this platform really is. And what I mean by powerful, it's the opportunity to build connections, relationships with people that I never would have the opportunity to meet were I to rely on face-to-face networking, conferences and so forth. And I love learning and meeting new guests. Every time I have a new guest, I learn and take away something, and of course I have the opportunity to be able to make an impact with my message, with what I have learned, and it's such a unique and powerful platform that I don't actually believe that any other medium has, to be honest. And I've done all of the social media, been in business for a while, so I'm one of those people that loves those bright shiny new objects. So if there's something there, I've probably tried it. But you know what's been the constant throughout all of my business and career has been podcasting.
Talk to me about some of the hidden gifts or gift that you have gotten from podcasting itself. For example, when I started podcasting, I had no idea that that the relationships were going to come as a part of it. That free coaching that I've been able to get from some of the biggest leaders in the world that normally get $25,000 to $100,000 for an hour worth of conversation. They're giving me their time. As a matter of fact, they're raising their hand and saying, "Hey, I want to be on your show." What are some of those hidden gifts that you've gotten from podcasting?
Well, I'm an extroverted introvert, which means that I rarely will go to a networking event or a conference and be comfortable in just going out and introducing myself, building new connections. However, it's interesting that I'm able to do so when I say to people, I'd love to interview you on my podcast. It gives me that opportunity as a give, but in actual fact, for me, it is something that I use as a way to connect. And I often will share a story of it, and it kind of focuses on what I won't go into today, but it's my worst business failure ever. Is actually the best, and we all have one of those stories, don't we? But it is actually the best thing that ever happened to me, because as an entrepreneur, one of the things that we often lack is focus. We're too, unfocused. But it allowed me to start Women in Leadership podcast. And when I started that podcast, it was a very selfish reason that I wanted to start that. And that was because I was burnt out. We'd built a 7-figure pipeline, and that was kind of left. We had to walk away from the partnership. And I thought, how on earth am I going to get over my grief and my loss? And I thought, you know what? I can't write, can't put together content, but I can ask great questions. I can do that. So I'm going to selfishly surround myself with incredible women. I'm going to interview them and find out what did they do to get over, failure. What did they do? And 3 episodes into a podcast that I started as a selfish reason to surround myself with awesome women, none of them had any idea that I had done that. For that reason, I accidentally generated 2 4-figure clients from a podcast that I started as a way to get over my grief and loss. And it wasn't until many years later, sometimes these lessons don't actually hit us till down the track. I thought, my goodness, what needed to be in place for 2 women who had no idea who I was to Google brand business consultant, come across the website, listen to the 3 episodes where I was actually interviewing other people, mind you, but look around the website, all of those things, what needed to be in place. So I kind of went on a bit of a journey of looking at what needed to be. And that's now, of course, what I teach. And why I'm able to say, start to generate and nurture listeners into leads from your very first episode, because that's what happened to me with Women in Leadership. And there you go. That was from a podcast. You can build a relationship that way with people who have no idea who you are and build that engagement.
So it sounds like from the get-go, you kind of got it. You understood where the power of podcasting really rests. Many people that have been successful at podcasting are serial podcasters. They've developed more than one show. I think I probably host right now on any given week 7 podcasts that I'm actually the host of. Not all of them are as regular as our anchor or our flagship show, The Nice Guys Own Business. What are some of the other shows that you have been involved with? Because you do have a long history in the podcasting space since 2008. So tell me some of the shows that you've hosted or produced.
So Women in Leadership is one that I still host and produce. Then I have another one, the Christian Entrepreneurs podcast. And then I have the pleasure to work with my alliance partners who are business communities. So over the years, have been the host and producer of Speaker Success podcast for Women Speakers Association, which is a global community, Business Women Australia, Business and Heels networking group. And so that's a lot of conversations that you have, but you're absolutely right. We are serial often in the conversations. But here's one of the things, especially for business owners, and a lot of my clients are coaches and consultants. They're experts who really want to position their thought leadership whilst really attracting an audience of their ideal clients. So similarly to, the fact that it's easy to launch a business, to start a business, but launching and starting a business that is profitable, that is able to be scaled, so that, because many of my, as I said, are coaches, so we're selling our time. To scale that, you have to put, processes and procedures in place and programs that enable you to do the one-to-many business model. So similarly, with a podcast, it's quite simple to start a podcast. We've, started many, but there's a difference in starting a podcast and having a right strategy. If you want to use it as a way to build relationships, to build your reach, to build, your reputation as a trusted authority, as well as generating revenue from that around different streams. Many of us, when we think about a podcast, we often, and I did too, when I first started, what can I compare a podcast to? Mainstream radio. But I've since learned that a podcast actually is far deeper than just a radio. And I do not say that to offend. It's just different, where you have a host that might be there for entertainment and so forth. The audience, if you get that right, is so highly engaged, on a call to action, because we have built that know, like, and trust with a host. I don't know how many books and how many things that I have bought because the host has said, you need to get this. It's been a life changer for me. And I thought, well, if it's good for them, I'm getting it in my Kindle. So, be mindful about the fact that your audience that you're building, that know, like, and trust, is so unique. Be mindful that you don't throw ads, that ad stacking and stuff. And that's what we compare to mainstream radio, where they get monetization from their audience through advertising and sponsor dollars. And if you're an expert, a trusted authority, that you're building that thought leadership, your monetization is in the message and the programs and so forth. And there's a strategy that is around that.
Wow, you said so many great things in that 3 or 4 minutes of you responding to my question. I don't even know where to start with it. I have a feeling I want to ask you this question first, and then we're going to go from there. I talk to my clients, and we own a podcast production company, and we do full service coaching when it comes to podcast building and all of that. And one of the things that we challenge our clients with is to pick a lane. Are you in podcasting because you want to build a monetization tool? Are you in it because you want to build your community? Or are you in it because you want to gather influence and become the go-to thought leader in your space? So if I said to you when you first got started in 2008, all right, Annemarie, you got a choice. Money, influence, or community, what order would you put those in then? And what order would you put them in right now? So money, influence, and community.
Yeah. We started our very first podcast. I was in the career industry then. It's still an industry I'm passionate about. And that was when the global financial crisis hit. And one of the things that was so annoying to a co-host, it was a co-host podcast, the first one. He was also in the career industry, separate business, was the doom and gloom that mainstream media was portraying. And we knew that things were tough. Things needed to change as far as job searches is concerned. But we also knew that if people continue to listen to the doom and gloom and the negativity, they would find it very difficult to move forward. And so we thought we need to be the hope and a voice of hope and inspiration. That's what drove us. And we had no idea what we were doing. Thankfully, my co-host had done 12 months as a radio host studies. And he was told at the end of that 12 months, your voice is too squeaky. So, but thankfully to us, he came and he brought, his expertise to us. And because, our message and the influence and the impact, we didn't necessarily think of income at that stage. We assumed, and here's another assumption that, looking back, don't assume things. We assumed that we would share our story, we would have guests, and that listeners would go, oh, Keith and Annemarie are so awesome. I'm going to go out and find out how I can work with them. But as we know, that is not always the case. That was actually one of the reasons why we gave up our podcast after 2 years, because you realize as business, we're putting a lot of time and energy. There is a lot of time and energy, isn't there? Mm-hmm. You would know that, Doug, having a production company and running multiple podcasts. There's time, that a commitment, there's monetary, behind that. And so one of the things that I now look at to answer your question, we do things a little bit differently. Yes, we always want to make influence and have an impact on the lives of the people who are our audience, but through the lens of a business and outcomes. If I had to sit in front of a director, committee of directors and say, or board of directors and say to them, I want to continue my podcast. Yes, but what is kind of the impact? There has to be some kind of monetary, if you will, not all the time, but most of the time, if we're going to continue to do a marketing strategy. And so for me, I always think of what is the end in mind? What am I focusing on? And if I can continue to leverage my podcast as a way to build relationships, get on other, what are some of those end in mind things? Build relationships, have that be further conversations where I'm off the podcast, having a Zoom conversation. Any of those will naturally, if you've got your message right and you continue to share thought leadership content on your podcast, you will start to be that 1% difference that make a difference. It just happens. And so think about what's the end in mind. Don't get focused on some of the typical things that people focus on, and that is vanity numbers. I want to get on the new and noteworthy. I want to have 1 million downloads. Lovely. But if you've got a highly niched podcast and you've got a highly engaged audience, a smaller number, but you focus on building your reputation equity rather than focusing on vanity numbers, you will generate results.
Oh my gosh, so great. Again, you said so many things in there that I'm glad I have this recorded, not just for the sake of my community, but because if I play these back over and over again, it will just remind me of all of the wisdom that you are sharing that I thought I was sharing with my clients, but sometimes they don't listen, and especially that one about the highly niched message that you have. I have a show called Ford Mustang, the early years behind me. You can't see this if you are listening to the podcast, but if you're watching this live on video right now, which nobody is because it's just you and me right now, Annemarie, I have a show. We get typically about 1,000 listens an episode, which is good, but it's not like Tim Ferriss millions. But if I have an opt-in or a landing page or a promo that I'm running, we usually get between 200 and 300 people that opt in. Now, what other thing can we do in the world that we will have a 30% or 20 to 30% opt-in? That's somebody raising their hand and saying, I want more of what you are sharing. It is the best thing that you can possibly imagine when it comes to podcasting, building that know, like, and trust factor, niching it down. The riches are in the niches. Absolutely. I'd much rather have, as I say all the time to my clients, I'd much rather have 20 people that are engaged in listening than 20,000 that do absolutely nothing. And that's the majority of what people are seeking, is that ego metric, that how many downloads. And again, I say this all the time. You cannot take a download to Wells Fargo to cash it at the bank. They're not going to take it. They will take your money though. So it sounds like community was first when you first started in 2008. And then monetization may have been even on the tail end, the last priority. Now it sounds like monetization, using a board of directors mentality and a business building mentality, which I think is extremely wise, starting with the monetization strategy in mind, keeping in mind also, if you're listening to this as our podcast, that all of these things are byproducts of each other. You become an influencer, you will make money and build your community. You become a monetization monster at building your podcast and your pipeline, you will absolutely have a community that will follow you and influencers that follow you as well. What is talking about monetization, what are some of the things that you have done to monetize? How are you monetizing your show? And I know it's not through the traditional means, like, well, when most people think about advertising, they go directly to the sponsorship and advertising thing. And that's not where any of us normal people go. Now, I could be wrong here. So where do you go when it comes to monetization?
When I started Ambitious Entrepreneur Show, which is my award-winning podcast that you talked about earlier, I did have some sponsors. So I have had sponsors. However, now I've probably turned away, I would have to say hundreds, because one of the things that is so important to me is that I'm either using the business as a service, so I know the impact that service has provided, or I know that it is going to be of absolute integrity and of service to my audience. That's so important to me. The audience for me is everything, my community. So where I really am monetizing, so whether I'm having a guest on the show or whether I'm doing a solo show, just sharing some of my own knowledge, the call to action, so the value is always there in the content, but I know that what I'm sharing is going to be of relevance and of interest around the biggest struggle that audience member is dealing with at the moment, or there is a goal or an outcome. So they're wanting to know about that. And then there's a gentle call to action at the end of that, because my goal is get people off the podcast and onto my list, into my community. And not everybody is going to be ready yet, but that nice call to action. And the reason is that sometimes as coaches and consultants, we don't want to ask because we don't want to seem pushy and salesy. But if you're not sharing with someone who is there and needs that whatever you're giving away to them, if you don't let them know, that they're not going to find out, because life and business gets in the way. And so what we've created is a 3-part podcast series. We give people the information and the content in a way that's consumable, in the way that they're listening to a podcast. So rather than, there's a whole kind of study that I've done around this where, asking my community, if you're listening, would you read an ebook? No, many of people said, no, that's why I like audio. But would you listen to me talking? And I think depending on the longevity and how many people, or whether they know, like, and trust you, the more they know, like, and trust you, the more they're going to give you the most valuable asset that they have, and that is your time. They can never get back time. And so there's a whole strategy that we kind of teach around that, but it's getting people off the podcast. It may be giving them heads up about a masterclass or a challenge. So those people who put their hand up to say, yeah, I'm interested in that, they're obviously interested in that. So there's someone that you can then continue to build that know, like, and trust around that specific area. But that's the strategy that we create. That's why I say start nurturing listeners into leads from your very first episode, because the very first episode, or the 3, should be you walking with your ideal client along the buyer's journey, along the customer journey, giving them some insights, challenging the status quo of your industry. There's a whole kind of framework that, again, we use, so that first 3 episode gives them an introduction of you, and those people who are interested, even, when you're in up to episode 100, 200, 300, whatever, that's the call to action, because the content that you're sharing is obviously of interest. And if they want to dive deeper, here's how you get access to this podcast series. And by the way, there's some checklists and some other goodies that I've shared into that. There you go. They're now part of your list. And
again, a wealth of knowledge just in the last answer alone. And I know that you probably have learned so many lessons over the course of 13, 14 years of podcasting. Wow, it's been a long, you were one of the pioneers when it comes to podcasting. If you were in it when it was hard to get your podcast up on Apple Podcast or any of the platforms. What's one of the biggest hurdles that you've had to overcome over the years, if you can even think back to the early stages? And what's something that you're still working on solving now as a podcaster?
Yeah, I think if I look back on some of the challenges, for me, it's maybe not necessarily from the podcast point of view, but I guess it is because, in business, and I think I mentioned this before we press record, and this is something that I think many entrepreneurs struggle with. And this is what I have struggled with and what I continue to struggle with. And often, well, when I say continue to, I can let myself become distracted by the bright, shiny new objects. And bright, shiny new object for me, by the way, back in 2008 was a podcast. I had so many colleagues, what are you doing that for? Because for them, they only had radio and we had a small niched audience. So they thought it was a bit of a waste of time. Now, many of those colleagues are coming back to me and saying, hey, can you help us get ours set up? So for me, it's really focus. And so when you look at it from the point of view, or a lens, if you will, of a podcast, if your message is not focused, if it's not niched enough, it's going to be very hard, particularly now, to cut through the noise, because there's so many other podcasts. So spend a bit of time in really, as you said, and it's so true, where do you want to position yourself? What's the end in mind for your business? By the way, your podcast could become a saleable asset. Something else, which was a happy mistake. I remember a few years ago now, I actually stopped production of the Ambitious Entrepreneur Show because I got bored with the content, and I thought, I'm just going to stop for a while. When I announced it on Facebook, I had over half a dozen people message me and say to me, hey, would you consider selling your podcast? And I'm thinking, selling my podcast? Number one, no. And I thought, I'm surprised that you're even considering that. But if you have the right message, you're building an audience. There was already a reputation because it was often, listed in the top this and top that at the time. People saw that there was value. I considered the name. So be mindful about even the name. Are you strategically wanting to do that to build your personal brand? Fantastic. Call it the Annemarie Cross Show or, the Doug Show. But if you down the track want to sell that and maybe package that with your database, your website, because someone else is as passionate and can take that over, the name of your podcast can make a huge difference. And that's the kind of thing that, I've learned over the years, and now very much want to share it with others. Don't kind of make the mistakes that I made or make the happy accidents that I made right from the beginning. And I've had so many interviews that I've done with business consultants and strategists that have, that sell businesses, buy and sell. And they always say, start with the end in mind, build the asset as if you were going to sell that. If you have the same mindset with your business and podcast, you could just create an asset that someone would love to invest in.
One of the things that my partner Strickland and I have learned over the last several years is to really work within our, what we would call, and what Gay Hendricks calls it's the zone of genius. Where do you spend the majority of your time? And if I spend any time in a spreadsheet, or if I spend any time in building a system, I know I'm in the wrong spot. Anytime that I don't enjoy doing what I'm doing, I'm probably not working within my zone of genius. What's some of the things that you rely upon someone else to take over for you? And what are some things that you maybe that you need to get it off your plate, but you just can't because you're probably like me, we're all a little bit of a control freak to a degree, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I recently, and I invested in a high-level mentor because I could see that was an area that I really struggled with. I'm good at the marketing, the front-end aspects of that, but it's the back end, building out the connection and the relationship building that is automated. And I have tried, I think I've tried almost every single piece of technology and platform that is out there to business kind, and many of them have fallen over flat and so forth. So it's taken me years to get to a place where I'm happy with the technology and that is able to grow and expand with my business. But I needed to get a mentor for that so that I could follow the steps that she'd implemented, so I didn't have to try and learn that all myself. I think that's for all of us in business. Find someone who's doing what you want, who can teach you what you need to know so that you don't have to take the 20 years that it's taken them to learn that. And to answer the second question, absolutely. I do have a team of editors, but there's something about listening to a story and what you edit out and cut out that just makes the conversation. So with some of my VIP clients who we do the hosting and the production aspect for, even though I have a team that does the audio, I'll still listen because there might just be something that they say, my client says that I think I'm just going to cut that out. I just can't help myself, But yeah, it's the story, the conversation, the storyline, that kind of thing. I just love it. So you may just see me edit a podcast every now.
I've been known to go in there with my Hindenburg program and go in and do my own editing on some things every once in a while. And again, very similar to you, we have a team of editors as a production company. Yes, I mean, we've hired people to do this for us, but sometimes I like to go in there and just mess around with it myself. You just
start off, don't you, Doug? I'll just have a listen to the first whatever, and then I'll just take that out. Oh, look, it's I'm third of way through. I might as well just continue.
And 3 hours later, I'm still sitting behind there. Some work that somebody else could have probably done in 20 minutes, I'm spending 3 hours doing. For just one final moment, I want to spend just a moment providing advice. I'd love to be able to talk to the beginner podcaster, but I don't want to use your experience to promote to the beginner podcaster. I really want to rely upon you with the seasoned podcaster for just a second. Somebody that's got 100+ episodes under their belt, just trying to work through, and I wouldn't say struggle, but just working through the whole monetization, influence, or community building aspect of their show. What advice would you provide them with to help them along their journey?
Yeah, these are the people that I tend to. I'm just working with someone, onboarding someone today. I've got a fantastic series of episodes. They've got so many different aspects of their thought leadership, but bringing it all together, I think, can sometimes be a real difficulty for them because there's so many things that they're good at. How do I bring that into a clear, concise message and then have that come through on the podcast as well? Sometimes, you may find in your podcast that if you have a look at your message and how you want to move forward, needs to change a little bit, needs to tweak. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to restart your whole podcast, because that's sometimes what we do, don't we? I'm going to start a fresh new year. I'm going to stop that podcast. Has anyone else done that? I have. And I'm going to start a brand new one. There may be people on your existing podcast who are actually your ideal client. So rather than throwing everything away and starting from scratch, have a look at and get clarity around where it is that you want to position yourself. That all has to be very important. But then you can I call this seeding and leading. You can start sharing that with your existing audience take them on the journey. In fact, I would encourage you to do that. Start asking questions, getting feedback. This is what we're thinking of doing. We're starting to take shape around this is where we really want to start taking our guests and our content. Where are you most stuck? And then through that information and that collaboration, because let them collaborate and get buy-in from that, you can then slowly develop a podcast series, that often, even if you're in episode 101 and you think, I can't do that from episode 1. Guess what? Yes, you can. You can then start that 3-part and have that as a special series. And then from podcast 120, we are going to shift the focus. And this is where we're really going. So if this is you, come along and, on that journey. So rather than throwing things away and stopping things, see how you can continue to leverage off the momentum that you've already built. Because I think momentum is so important, isn't it? And that's often what's lacking, because there's so many different pieces of the things that we're juggling as entrepreneurs. There's no momentum because it's like different plates. Put them all together and something that unites and combines and integrates well, and then everything works forward in the right direction. So that's probably my last, would be a piece of advice to
Great advice. Great advice. I so appreciate you being here. And if you're in our community and you're listening and you want to check out a fabulous show, she's going to be here for a long time. She's already got 300 plus episodes under her belt. She's got many, 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 many more coming. It's at theambitiousentrepreneursshow.com. We'll make sure we put a link in the show notes for it. Annemarie Cross, thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing your message and your wisdom with our community.
Oh, thank you, Doug, for the opportunity. Thank you.
For the Nice Guys on Business, I'm Steve O'Brien. Fill up your week with the nice guys. Well, there's always money in the banana stand.